All right, today we're going to call this selection choices in Photoshop. So Photoshop, to make a selection, you want to have what's called marching ants. There are lots of ways to get marching ants, to make a selection, to do things with various parts of the photograph or the entire photograph. The easiest way to make a selection of everything is the second tool down here. It's called the rectangular marquee tool, and if you hold it down, you can have the elliptical marquee tool or single row, single column. The elliptical marquee tool, if I click and drag, it's going to draw a rectangle, and then when I grab the move tool, it's going to move the entire contents of the marching ants. Same thing if I switch to the ellipse, the elliptical tool, I'm going to select marching ants around the oval, and anything I do now is going to affect only the stuff that's inside the oval, including if I make an adjustment layer, I've made an adjustment layer of just the stuff that's inside the oval. So anything that goes on inside the marching ants is going to be affected when you make marching ants. Now there'll come a time when you'll have to make more defined areas or more detailed areas where you make a selection, and that's what we're going to work on today. And you've got several other selection tools that we're going to run through. First one is a lasso tool. The lasso tool works, basically I'm going to click and I'm holding down and I'm dragging out around her, and it makes a rough selection. I could take the time to go around her head and wiggle the selection as I go. But when I let go, it's going to immediately make the marching ants happen. So I've got to make sure I get back, if I'm using the lasso tool, I've got to get back to where I started from or close to where I started from, so that when I let go, it completes the path and makes the marching ants. And now when I grab the move tool or I do something to it, the stuff that's selected is inside the marching ants is happening. Hiding beneath the lasso tool, the polygon lasso tool and the magnetic lasso tool. The polygon lasso tool is great for doing things like buildings, because now I'm clicking and dragging and it lays down straight paths between the clicks, and then when I get back to the beginning, it creates the marching ants, and that's when I would have the ability to do something inside the marching ants. So that's great for things that have really straight sides. Hiding underneath that is the magnetic lasso tool. Magnetic lasso tool is kind of cool. A lot of people prefer it. What I'm doing is I don't even have to hold the button down. And what it's doing is, as I'm following the girl's head, the computer's making a prediction as to what it is that it thinks I'm trying to select. So I'm going the faster you go, the less detailed it's going to be. The slower you go, the more detailed it's going to be. It's never going to be 100% detailed, but you can see it's laying down these little points as I go. And when I get back to the very beginning and I get to the very first dot it laid down, the tool changes. You can see there's a little circle next to it, and now I have the marching ants. So the magnetic lasso tool is kind of cool to use. The one right below that we've already used before, or maybe you have, maybe you haven't, the quick select tool. The quick select tool kind of works the same way. It's making a prediction based on the pixels, and so as I click and drag, I'm laying down marching ants, and if I make a mistake, I can hold down the option button. Let's say I come out here and I didn't want to get that included. I want to hold down the option button. I can fix that. I can make the brush bigger, which will make bigger selections, or I can make the brush smaller, which will make smaller selections. So for instance, if I want to be in here around the hair, I'm going to hold the option button down, make my brush smaller, and I can make holes in amongst her hair here. Or I can make smaller selections up into her on these little wispy hairs that hang out up here. So it's a little bit more accurate, a little bit more defined. If I hold this button down, hold the quick select button down, it's what's called the magic wand tool. The magic wand tool is great when you have things where you know they're identical colors or similar colors, and you can turn the tolerance up So for instance, if I turn the tolerance up to 100 and I click on the same area, I get more of a selection. So what I'm doing is I'm telling it to look for pixels that are of a similar color, and when I click on that, it selects an area that is defined by those color of pixels. The last couple selection tools are even more detailed. The pen tool is actually, it's great for drawing shapes, but I can use the pen tool to click. If I just click and click, it's going to lay down straight lines. If I click and drag, it's going to lay down curved lines, and I can go around my object pretty quickly with both curves and straight lines to get them traced in kind of like a silhouette, almost like you cut them out of paper. And the reason why this is an advantageous tool is because with the magnetic lasso tool, it's doing kind of the same thing, but the magnetic lasso tool doesn't allow you to move those points around at all. This gives you complete control. So when I get back to the beginning, I can grab the white arrow, the direct selection tool, and I can move points around. If I've made any errors, I can make things tighter, I can change the curve of things, I can move things so that they fit my object a little bit better, gives myself a little bit more flexibility to include things or exclude things. And then when I'm done, I go back to the pen tool and I have all these choices. I can select it, I can mask it, or I can make a shape. What I typically do is I make a shape because it puts it on its own layer, and then I can come back to it later. So I'm going to turn that eyeball off. If I hold the command button down, anything that's its own shape, I hold the command button down. Now I've got marching ants in the shape of the pen tool that I just drew. The last one I'm going to show you is called the Quick Mask tool. The Quick Mask tool is kind of cool because if I take and the last thing down here on the toolbar is a rectangle with a dotted line circle in the middle of it. That's the Quick Mask tool. If I select that and I grab a paintbrush, what you'll notice is I want my opacity and flow to be 100%. I want my brush size hardness to be up at 100%. And as I start to paint on the mask tool, you'll get this kind of pink masky looking thing to hang out. And when I'm done painting with the mask tool, I can make the brush bigger. And I'm selecting these things. If I make a mistake, I simply turn this to click on the bent arrow and bring the white to the front. And now I can erase the mask. And then when I'm done with my mask, using this pink stuff, I click back on the tool and I get marching ants. So all of the stuff that I had painted pink is going to be excluded, and the stuff that I'm not painting, becomes included. So I'll continue painting on around her. And I can do it really, really quickly. And then fix mistakes that I have here and get very accurate here. I can downsize the brush. This allows me to get really fine. So like I could get up and hit these little tiny little hairs. Do each individual little hair if I wanted to. And then when I'm done, make a selection, and there I have my marching ants. So those are some ways to make selections.